Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the How to Be a Redhead podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to talk to you all about childbirth and you being a doula. For our listeners who don't know what a doula is, we just wanted to give a quick definition. Is a woman employed to provide guidance and support to a pregnant woman during labor. And we also know you're a childbirth educator, a birth doula, and a self-proclaimed birth enthusiast. And you currently live in Florida. And we found you on TikTok, which is super exciting on our end when we saw your video. And in this video, you ask your viewers if these 4 facts about natural redheads during birth fact or fiction. Number 1 being more pain during labor. Number 2, more anesthesia is needed. Number 3, more tearing. 4, increased PP hemorrhage. We feel 2 and 4 are the facts. For me personally, I really think 3 or 4 for me personally with my births, and we can go into that, are factual to me personally being a natural redhead. But is this correct? And why is it more prone for redheads? What is the cause?
Yeah, that's a great question. So redheads are, I'm going to read off of the blog that I wrote for you guys so I get this crystal clear.
Yes.
Redheads require more anesthesia because of a genetic variation in a gene called the MC1R gene, which is associated with red hair, fair skin, and a difficulty with tanning. This genetic variation means that women often require more anesthetic during labor, and they do also have more pain because that gene is also tied to pain receptors. So, redheads in general require about 20% more pain medication and anesthesia during not only childbirth, but any surgical procedures at all.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
know.
It's so interesting that I feel like it's such an important thing for redheads to know about their genetic makeup because I feel like it's just going to be a form of wealth for you and such a better experience and stuff. You can speak on that. But if you know your genes and you know what you're expecting, then probably going into the situation is going to be a lot easier just because you know to expect it.
Absolutely. And, I first found this out because an anesthesiologist asked my client if she were a natural redhead. She had kind of some other highlights in her hair, but the anesthesiologist was like, "Hey, are you a natural redhead?" And she was like, "Yes, I am." And he was like, "I'm so glad that I asked you because I'm going to need to up the dose for your medication now for this to take effect." So,
Hmm.
he might not have if he had not asked her that, he might not have used enough medicine and it wouldn't have taken her
Hmm.
epidural wouldn't have taken effect during childbirth, and she was in quite a bit of pain. So, it's nice to know these things going in. I have 2 redheads myself, and I did not know about this when my children were little, and my son had to have a dental procedure done, and he was in so much pain that it was traumatic for him. It was traumatic for me as his mother watching it. And now that I know what I know about redheads and pain and medications, I wish I would have advocated. I advocate for him now, like, hey, don't forget he's a redhead. He needs more pain medication. And most doctors know this, but every once in a while you'll come across a healthcare provider who is like, oh, they're taken aback by it. So it's nice to
Yeah.
have that knowledge.
Yeah. So, wow, you have 2 redheaded children. So, who's redheads on you and your husband's side?
So it's interesting because I have a great grandfather who's a redhead, but that's the only like redhead on my side of the family. But then my sister in laws, we all started popping out these red haired children. And I have some blonde highlights, but I'm a natural brunette. And so is my sister and both my sister in laws. And we were like, where are these redheads coming from? And it's just like long past ancestors, great great grandparents and whatnot from both of our sides that had red hair.
Wow, I know the gene is so
Wow.
crazy, the MC1R gene that you were referring to. And I know looking at this list, like I said, I had an epidural. I had a C-section with my son, and then I did a VBAC, a successful VBAC with my daughter. And both experiences were so different, having a C-section and then doing vaginal. Um, I had an epidural for both. I couldn't, I give props to natural birth. I was like, give me the epidural right away. But I never asked the anesthesiologist in both situations if I needed more being a redhead. I think I was just so focused on that, delivering my son and the C-section. And this was during COVID. So it was a lot. My husband had to like fully mask up. And when they took my son out, the COVID protocols were he couldn't, they had to, there was basically like a barrier almost. And then they gave him to us. And then it was different, of course, with my daughter. But my daughter, I was just in so much pain from the contractions, as you know. So I never asked. But um, I did have tearing with her. I had, I think, fourth degree. And then with my son, though, this was interesting. And we mentioned this on a podcast before, an episode where we talked briefly about bleeding. Was I had my son, and then I wasn't aware during a C-section, they have to like check you for hemorrhoids and blood clots. So they were pushing on my stomach. It was like the most pain I've ever been in. And they were finding that there were just so many blood clots that they had to call my OB, who was actually, she was going home. She was in the parking garage and she came back. And as she was coming in the room, she goes, Steph, I knew you were going to cause me problems, you being a natural redhead. And I was like, doctor, what do you mean? And she was like, oh, redheads bleed more. And it was the first time that I've heard that. So then I had to go back under for a DNC. So that was something unexpected. But yeah, I look at this and I'm like, oh my gosh, a lot of this pertains to me personally in my professional, or not professional, but just my personal experience having children.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was doing my research about postpartum hemorrhaging and bleeding for redheads, there's not a lot of really great research that
Yeah.
back it up. There are a couple of studies from like the mid 2010s that say redheads have the same coagulation factors, and coagulation is how, for your listeners, is just how well your blood can clot. And it says the studies say that redheads have the same coagulation factors that brunettes and blondes and people of other hair color have, but that they bruise more. However,
Yeah.
when I speak to healthcare providers, anecdotally, they do share with me that their redheaded patients do bleed more. So I would love to see more studies performed regarding redheads, and I think that would just be so fascinating to dig into more.
Yeah, I agree because then, with my daughter, my OB who said that about the bleeding, she retired. So she didn't deliver my daughter, but I stayed in the same practice. And then when I was discussing a VBAC, I mentioned, okay, I had to go under for a DNC with my son. You know, I redheads bleed more. And one of my new OB was like, like that's not scientifically proven. So it's interesting how both doctors in the same practice had different opinions on redheads bleeding more. But I think, Jessica, it's to your point on there's just not a lot of studies, and doctors, of course.
And it's based on their experience. Like she probably saw you and was like, oh, I've dealt with other redheads who have this. It was probably based off of all of her years and knowing that there isn't a lot of scientific evidence yet.
Yeah.
But that she was like, I'm having this experience time and time again with natural redheads.
And it's probably exactly to your point, Adrian, because my doctor who retired, she was doing it for like 40, 50 years. And then this doctor who was my new OB who was my doctor throughout, didn't deliver my daughter, but the one who said, like, I haven't really heard that. She was in her late 30s. So it could be the experience, and maybe sounded to me like they didn't teach it in med school, but again, could be because there's just not a lot of studies.
Right. Yeah, I would think that would be true. And as far as the perineal tearing goes, a lot just across the board, I don't have the exact numbers, but a lot of women experience some form of perineal
Yeah.
tearing after birth.
Ugh.
So that's another one that also just doesn't have like the really good studies behind it to back it up. But you're in good company because a lot of women tear in some form or another during birth. So I have yet to support somebody during birth who doesn't tear when they have a
Okay.
vaginal delivery. So
So that makes me not feel so alone. That was really, really painful. I don't think anyone prepared me. And I remember the nurse in the hospital was like, okay, I recommend I use the spray that she gave me. And then every day, twice a day, do a sit spat,
yeah,
and it was just so hard to come home and I had a toddler and then I'm also nursing to sit there for 15 or 20 minutes in this sit bath. So
And then she went on Shark Tank 2 months later, and we had to be in LA, and she had to pretend like she's fine. I mean,
yeah.
Steph props.
Oh, thanks,
wow.
thanks. But yeah, that first month, no one prepares you. No one prepares you for C-sections recovery and then vaginal if you do tear. So I think, yeah, women are amazing, aren't we?
We really are. And I agree. There needs to be a lot more education behind the what happens when you go home, especially when you have a toddler
Yeah.
and you have all these things that you have to care for now. Your body that has been through, quite an intense process and a newborn, and your uterus is contracting and involuting, and it's going through involution contractions. So it's contracting to get back down to its normal size. And that
Hmm.
can cause quite a bit of pain and discomfort. And you're trying to care for your tears. And yeah, I try my best to educate on all these things on my social media platforms. And, I'm always hoping that I at least get through to a few people. So
Yeah, no, and you are. I mean, we discovered you on TikTok, and we wanted to ask what initially drew you to becoming a doula?
that's a great question. I've worked with the prenatal community pretty much my entire professional life. So for the last almost 20 years. And I started out in fitness. So I was teaching pregnant women how to exercise and how to do
Mm,
prenatal yoga. And then just over time, I went back to graduate school to study traditional Chinese medicine, and I was drawn to the women's reproductive side of things.
hmm,
And then I had my own births, and I had a doula at my second birth, and it made a huge difference
yeah.
in how I was supported, in how I managed pain, and how I, went through the entire experience. And she just gave me so many little like wisdom nuggets, if you will, that helped me kind of be more present during the experience, that I was like, oh my gosh, everybody
Hmm.
should have one of these.
Yeah, I know. I wish I had one. It wasn't, I don't know. I never thought about it, but I wish I would have been more educated on it. Um, yeah. And there is a difference between a doula and a midwife.
Oh, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
a midwife is a trained medical professional. So she's gone to usually she's a certified nurse midwife. So she has a
Okay.
nursing background. And there is kind of a difference between midwives who practice in hospital versus midwives who do home and birth center births. Um, I mean, there technically shouldn't be a
Okay.
difference, but midwives who practice in a hospital usually are a little more medically minded and support more of the techno medical paradigm of birth. Not always, though. And then midwives who practice in birth center and home births are a little more of I hate to use the word natural because I believe all birth is natural, no matter how a baby comes into this world. Um,
Yeah.
but they maybe use more holistic techniques, if you will, to support women in labor and birth.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Um, and I guess how would someone see if a doula would be a good option for them if they're listening, wanting to get pregnant, or they are currently pregnant?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always recommend interviewing a couple of different doulas. And even
Oh,
myself,
okay.
when somebody reaches out to me, I'll ask them, have you interviewed anybody else? And would you like some recommendations? And people are always like, you're going to give me recommendations for somebody
Mhm.
else? I'm like, yeah, because I really think that our personalities should vibe and should mesh. And if you're like, even a little bit on the fence about liking me, that's okay. I want you to find somebody who you like, who is going to show up for you in all the ways you need them to show up for you in your labor to support you. Doulas are certified usually through different certification programs, but most of us are not medical professionals. So that's the difference between us and a midwife. But we are there to support not only the mom, but the husband or the partner or whoever is going to be present helping you during your labor. We're kind of a family support system. So I am just as much there for dads and grandmas and that I am the mom, although the mom does have my focus. But yeah, I mean, interview doulas just like you would potentially interview a provider like an OB or a midwife, and see which one supports your birthing values and what you find important during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. So if you're able to shop around, and ask the questions and see if a person melds well with you, I definitely recommend that.
Okay. And doula
I
services have been shown to help decrease infant mortality rates, which we found really fascinating. And we'll go into like your studying overseas and everything, studying different cultures, but have you offered your services in areas that you are traveling?
I have. So I did a lot of childbirth education and hooked up with some other childbirth educators in Malaysia and Thailand when I was there.
Mm.
As far as like going in and doing in-person support, because of the nature of our travel, we were up and moving usually like 6 to 8 weeks. So I was never in one place long enough to support somebody who was going to be giving birth in the next couple of months. But I would do spinning babies classes with them. I would do spinning babies is just starting to show up over in Asia and they love it. So I would
Is
do.
that when you're trying to flip them?
Well, yeah, yes and no. So spinning babies techniques do help turn breech babies head down,
Because
but
my son was breached,
well,
but nothing worked. And it was during COVID when I looked at a couple offerings where I am in Charlotte to help me flip him, but back then no one was seeing in person. So I
yeah.
remember I contacted a place and they just gave me a bunch of videos in their website and they were like, okay, try this, the ironing board technique.
Mhm.
And I'm also really into yoga, and I obviously stopped going into a studio during COVID. So I took up just in home practicing. So I
Yeah.
was constantly doing yoga poses, but he never flipped. He's a very stubborn 3-year-old. So maybe that, was his personality, but basically his head, he just wouldn't move on my right side.
Mhm.
So yeah. And it's interesting. My daughter took like 5 minutes for me to push and she was out, and she's just so much easier than him, even though she's younger.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. But yeah, so I just wanted to mention that. So spinning babies, is that similar to what I did at home?
Well, yeah, they do teach the breech tilt, which is the kind of
Yeah.
official name for that ironing board technique that you mentioned. But they have like a list of daily activities that's kind of like a hybrid between yoga poses and exercises that help bring balance to your body, not just your
Okay.
muscles, but your ligaments and the soft tissues of your body. So the thought is that if you're kind of holding tension in certain areas, like especially the fascia, the connective tissue of the body, that doing these postures and movements will help bring a relaxation to the fascia and a balance to
Hmm.
the muscles and ligaments to give your baby more space within the womb so they can turn into an optimal fetal position. So it's not
Okay.
just for breech or even transverse babies, which are lying sideways in the womb. It's also to bring the mother comfort during pregnancy. So if she's having a lot of round ligament pain or back pain or any of those common pregnancy symptoms, these techniques
Yeah.
will help relieve some of those and also help get baby into an ideal position for birth. However, I do want to mention sometimes breech babies, no matter what you do, will just never turn head down. And there's usually
Yeah.
a reason for that. And so, but unbeknownst to us, we don't know what that reason is. But babies are
Mm.
wise. And if
Yeah.
they can't turn head down, there's probably a very good reason for it. And so I'd always tell like my C-section mamas, like, there's probably a reason for that. And your baby was wise, and honor that. And that's a really good space to like be in.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice for maybe a mom who didn't expect to get a C-section. I think that's something that I tell my friends now who are pregnant that have this birth plan and is like, I want to stick to this plan and I'm gonna get vaginal and my water's gonna break at home and we're gonna, and that's not the case for a lot, in my situation. I never thought I was gonna have a C-section. And I just listened to my doctor, I listened to my body. And I remember a nurse was like, your baby's breached for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that you said that, because I think we can be hard on ourselves as women, especially in different situations on, you know, I think C-sections now are becoming more norm, and it's more like, oh, you had a C-section, but it's something that we don't talk about. Or it's not, I tell my girlfriends too that maybe are like, oh, I didn't think I'd have a C-section. I'm like, it's kind of like walking with your toddler. It's not like later down the road as adults, we're walking around saying, okay, how did your mom deliver you? And what age did you start walking? It just, and we all come into this world, every baby, in different ways. And I think it's beautiful. And yeah, I find it interesting too that I was breached. So I didn't know if that had something to do with, if there's studies, or have you heard that sometimes breached parents have breached babies? They ended up actually flipping me.
Mm-hmm.
But Adrian wasn't breached. But I found that interesting. And when I told my doctor, she was like, there's no connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't found any. I've found like hypotheses in papers that say, could there
Okay.
potentially be a genetic connection here? Maybe, but there's again just not enough research to be able to tell for sure. I find that sometimes women who are really active and very fit can that can sometimes influence the position of the babies, but also women who are very sedentary and not very active, that can influence the position of the baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that you're like, there could be so many reasons that
Mm-hmm.
is being influenced into these positions. And again, babies are, I believe, are wise, and they are going to go where they need to go. So, and you said that your son is a little stubborn now as a 3-year-old.
Very.
That's good. He's strong-willed. Like, he's going to be probably a leader, and he came into this world on his terms. So, I try to find the positives.
Yeah, that sounds about that. Yeah, no, that sounds about right. Yeah, I wasn't obviously my birth plan didn't go as expected with him, but then it was interesting with her, it did. I had to get induced, which that wasn't a plan. I thought, "Oh, my water would break and then we're just going to drive to the hospital." But I had to get induced because my daughter, they were showing that like the placenta has basically run its course, so to say, in simple terms. Like she wasn't growing anymore. But what's interesting about that, Jessica, um, and I know you're not a doctor, but the ultrasound was showing that her stomach was small and that she was only going to be like 5 pounds and something ounces. And then when she was born, the ultrasound was completely off and she was in like 6 pounds, 9 ounces. So I remember when they put her on the scale, we had a bid before like the thing flashed with her weight. With my husband and the two nurses, because of that ultrasound that really scared me, that got me induced. And then after I was like, maybe I didn't need to get induced. But it was fine. But yeah, it's crazy how I found out that ultrasounds aren't accurate.
They can be off anywhere from like an average of about 15%. So if a baby is showing that they're 5 pounds and they come out 7, that's not too, that's pretty, I've found that that's pretty common. So
Yeah.
it's hard to tell fetal size on an ultrasound. So yeah, this is a reason that a lot of people get induced. So you're also in good company there because
Okay.
um, fetal size is one of those reasons that providers like to suggest inductions to be on the safe side. So, I am not a medical provider. So when my clients come to me and they're like, well, what's your opinion on this? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I really, think you need to listen to your heart and have this conversation with yourself and with your partner, your husband, and listen to your provider, because God forbid I give them advice that goes against that and there's a problem. I would have to live with that,
Yeah.
So I always do suggest that they listen to their providers, but I do share, hey, we know that ultrasounds can be off by 15 to 20%. So, one of my favorite websites that I lead people to is Evidence-Based Birth. They are a
Oh.
nonprofit and they do a lot of research on pregnancy and birth. So they're a great resource for you if you are pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant and you want to know what your options are for birth and if these things will align with your birthing values. So maybe somebody says, hey, induction doesn't align with my birthing values. I'm like, okay, well, why don't you check out the articles at Evidence-Based Birth and then take those to your provider and have that discussion with your provider.
Oh, that's a great tip. Yeah.
Redheads, have you heard?
We aired on ABC's Shark Tank, episode 14, season 15. We are busy developing products and continuing to grow this incredible redhead lifestyle brand.
Check out our mascara and eyebrow products and red hot shades, hair care, merch, lifestyle items, and so much more. Redheads, we can now rejoice.
Finally, there are products for us.
Use code podcast to get 15% off your next purchase. Shop at shop.howtobearedhead.com. I was wondering too. So you were in Southeast Asia. I'm always interested in the differences with American culture and especially Asian culture, especially when it comes to medicine. And I know that you have a background in Chinese medicine. But what are the key differences in birth culture between the U.S. and Southeast Asia? I find that so interesting.
Adrian, I know your sister-in-law from in Seoul. Some of the things after childbirth is when you were saying some of the things,
different.
It's so different than like they wait on the mom for
weeks. For like a week she's in the hospital, and then the dad, like from what she told me, they wheel a bed in. This is in South Korea. And he has to be completely like no shirt on, and then like
skin
the
to
contact
skin.
with like skin.
They do that here.
It's just so important for the dad and for her. But like he's in the hospital all week, stuff with like having this experience.
Okay. And then when they get home,
like, it doesn't seem. It seems very like they're taking their time, whereas here people are getting it's insurance and like all that stuff. It plays.
Yeah, they're like one or two nights. One night if you're on your second or third, depending on how your childbirth went. With
I've never asked my sister-in-law, Lori, who lives in South Korea. I've never asked her birth story, but I'm sure she would tell me
because
if I asked.
Yeah, Jessica. So what's your experience with the Asian culture in America?
Yeah, so I studied Chinese medicine, and I've found that the Northern Asian countries are a lot different than the Southern Asian countries. And even where I went within Southeast Asia, from country to country, things varied so much. But one of the common things amongst a lot of Asian cultures is they place a lot of emphasis on postpartum care. So mom is very cared for. She's treated like a goddess during what's called the lying in period, which is about a 6 to 8 week, depending on where you are and what your culture is, about a 6 to 8 week period where mom is weighted on hand and foot. And there are certain yes, and
oh my gosh, I am so jealous because here, not women like maternity leave, depending on that woman's job, as I'm sure you know, some places it's a couple weeks. If that.
Yeah. Like Norway and some Dutch countries have really fantastic maternity leave that's like a year to 18 months long, paid maternity leave, by the way. So I've always said, if you're going to go have a baby and you need to move out of the country, go to like Sweden, Norway, one of like the Dutch countries, because they have it made over there. And a lot of those countries over there also do paternity leave, which I think is really fantastic. Paid paternity leave.
Yeah, my husband got 4 months, which I was very, very thrilled about. Yeah, with my son
for each one.
Oh,
for
wow.
each child. Yeah, and I was very fortunate because with my son, he took 8 weeks, and then he was working on various projects, and then with my daughter, he took the entire 4 months, and I really needed him. Just having a toddler and finding that balance in life where, oh my gosh, our whole life just got changed in the sense that now we have two humans we have to take care of. Jessica, I'm sure your children are 2 years apart, right?
They're 17 months apart. So,
Oh, they're
Oh
17.
wow.
Wow. Okay.
so yeah.
Do, wow. So you understand. Yeah, my son and daughter are about a little over 2 years apart, and it took weeks to get into our norm and to, and then my son he had a hard time because he only wanted me. And then he'd see me, if I was leaving the room nursing my daughter, he'd scream on the door, I remember. And it took a while to just get, again, into our norm. But if my husband didn't take 4 months paternity, I think I would have had slight postpartum depression because I think it would have all been heavily on me. And then we were going through Shark Tank, and that was one of the reasons why he took the 4 months is I really needed to prep and I didn't have a maternity leave. But I give it to, I sometimes see I know a mom who has two twin daughters. She has twin girls, and then she had a son, and she had only 5 weeks paternity. I help from the family, I think, is really great, but not everyone has that. So,
No, and like in a lot of parts of Asia, the whole family lives together. So it's very, you
mm,
know,
Mm.
mothers and
hands on.
fathers, like your mother and father would live with you and your husband, and you might have an aunt or two thrown in the mix. So it's a very like
Wow.
a very supportive family paradigm, and there's more of the concept of a village. So,
Okay.
especially in the actual villages. So, I did go to some
Yeah.
third world kind of
Wow.
countries that
Okay.
there were actual that I was in actual villages, and everybody works together. And when you hear that old saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," it takes a
Yeah.
village to care for a mother. So, I
Hmm.
really in our American culture and society, we've grown away from that village concept.
Yeah, we have.
And no wonder there's increased rates of postpartum depression and postpartum
Yeah.
anxiety and postpartum mood disorders. And, moms feeling like, what did I get myself into here? Because it can be
Yeah.
very overwhelming. So, yeah, I, really try and also encourage my clients to find that postpartum support. There are postpartum doulas who will come and care for you and be that person if you
Oh,
don't have
wow.
your family in town. And I do that
Yeah.
to a degree with my clients. I'll usually go twice after they have the baby. And like I went last week, my client had gotten home 2 days prior. So she had a 3-day old baby. And she was
Oh.
like, here, will you hold him while I go take a shower? And I was like, yes, of course.
I know it's the
Mm.
little things like
Yeah.
that where, oh my gosh, let me take a shower, do my hair,
Mhm.
maybe, actually finish my cup of coffee and not have to heat it up like 4 times because I left it somewhere. And I think too, and going off of what you said with the village and, all these expectations for a mom, especially in America. I don't think it comes to mind where I don't think social media helps in a way. I think it can and can't. Like we found you on TikTok with your informative videos and, you know, having you as an outlet on social, I think has helped a lot of moms. But I think too, there's also that what social media does for new moms, especially where they see and compare themselves to other moms on social, and then they're like, oh my gosh, that person like bounced back quicker than I did, and look at that mom, she has 4 kids, and this picture and this video looks like a glamorous trip to Target. And look, and I think Adrian, I have a friend that had a baby a couple months ago, and I told her, she sent me a text last week with a bunch of questions, and one of the things I said, I was like, me personally, I stopped following all these like moms that their life looks perfect on social because that's not realistic. And I started following like really funny accounts that actually are so real. And one of them is this comedian, and she has over 1 million followers, and her videos are really funny because it's like she's like talking about it's okay if like one video last week was it's okay if you're not making bento boxes
Yeah.
for your children with these like little cutout animals where you've had to do a grilled cheese in the morning. Like it's okay if you just give your kid like a bag of crackers and out of the box. And I appreciate the authenticity of some accounts like that as a mom now. And we're not having any more children, so I don't follow like baby accounts anymore, but the toddler ones where they're real and they're like, it's okay if there's a pile of laundry, like not everyone's house looks so glamorous. So I just wanted to say, like, have you had moms be like, talk about social media?
Yes. So, I had my kids in 2011 and 2013. So before
Okay.
Instagram really kind of took off to what it is today, when it was still just
Yeah.
a picture sharing platform. And even back then, I felt the same kind of pressure that you're talking about with those
Guilt. Yeah.
info boxes and making
Yes.
perfect lunches and making sure their outfits were perfect and this was perfect. And after a couple of years of that, I almost broke. I just
Yeah.
almost broke. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I have to find people who are not competitive, moms who are not competitive, but moms who are supportive. And if I show up with a dirty kid, like if he's a
Yeah.
little dirty from playing out in the backyard, they're not going to like
Yeah.
judge me over it.
Yeah.
So, it was helpful back then for me to, find people who are supportive. And I tell moms on social media all the time, it's okay to either take a break from that account or unfollow it if you need to.
Yeah.
Because the things that we consume are also the things that we watch that will have an effect on our spirit. And we want to be very careful what we're allowing into our energetic space that affect our spirits. And I've even told
Yes.
moms, I'm like, hey, if you need to take a break and unfollow my account, I get it. I want you to protect your mental health over follow. Like I'm not about the follower count. I'm about like, how can I support you? And so there's so many moms who come to me and they're like, I didn't have the birth I wanted, but I'm really glad that you talk about being supportive of all types of birth and that you talk about these tough things postpartum, because I find that people try to glamorize the postpartum and it's really frustrating for me because I'm struggling so much. So, I really try to I am a positive person, but I also try to talk about the reality of motherhood and raising children in this world today. And my own daughter, who's 11, has started to venture into social media. So I think, and people have strong opinions about that. And I'm like, if I don't teach her now, she's going to jump into this when she's a teenager and they're going to eat her alive. So I would rather teach her how
So what does that mean? Just curious, having a daughter who's younger, she won't be 11 for another 10 years.
Well, Steph, think about like anyone who was really sheltered growing up. Like we have friends like that who were just really sheltered. And then what happened when they went to college?
Yeah, they went crazy.
They got like alcohol poisoning and got nuts.
Yeah.
And you and I had a lot of freedom. So we never did that.
Yeah.
And I think it's very similar. I can just imagine, Jessica, like these young girls who their moms are helicopter moms and they're just like, I'm not going to let them on at all. Well, like they're going to eventually get on because it's culture. It's part of the world. And then I think they're going to take it a lot harder than anyone who's like trained almost by their mom and taught a healthy relationship with social media probably early on than to just wait until they're teenagers when they already have so many other problems going on. Being a teenager is not easy.
No.
So I don't know about adding social media 101 to that is going to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
go ahead.
Sorry. And then, I just wanted to ask too, what does that look like with your daughter? Like, are you giving her setting her up with an account?
Yeah, so she has an account that I manage basically. She's not allowed to show her face on her social media account. So she's an artist. She loves creating.
Wow.
So she shows her art and never shows her face. And so that's, I think, a nice introduction into how I love the creative aspect of social media. And she puts so much creativity and so much love and purpose into creating her videos around her art. And the rules are mom has to be able to follow, like, and comment. And
Yeah.
if we finally made her account where it wasn't private anymore, and I was like, I'm going to go through every once in a while and remove people if I think I need to remove them, and
Good.
just monitor the comments and teach her how to react to comments in a appropriate way and an appropriate way. I've found some kind of skeevy dudes on her social media before, so I've had to block them, and but again, she will be a teenager one day. She does not have an iPhone yet, but she will one day, and she will have I will have less influence over her life. So if I can teach her how to navigate social media now while she's young, I feel like she'll have the tools to kind of prepare for being present on social media when she's older, and handle like the bullying or because there's that whole thing now with girls bullying each other on social media, and
she's a redhead, right?
she's a redhead.
Right. So she's going to get comments about her red hair.
Mhm.
I think learning how to deal with that at a young age is going to be so beneficial for her life, because we still get comments. We're in our 30s, like you have to know right away how to handle it. And thank God that we dealt with it in our own way as kids, because I'm not surprised now when someone's like says something about your red hair in a good or bad way.
Yes, I can only imagine. So, those are the real life scenarios that I would like to help prepare her for, because, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I didn't have social media. So it's been a real learning process for me as well. And anything I can help her navigate her life for, I'm here for. So.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, since we found you on TikTok, we haven't done this with a guest before, but we thought it would be fun to close with a little fact or fiction game. So number one, so we're going to just say, you'll say fact or fiction, Jessica. Okay, 5 in 10 mothers water break before labor.
I'd say that was a fact.
Fiction we have here. It's about 1 in 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 1 in 10 mothers break before labor.
Water break
Steph,
before.
you're not alone.
Yeah.
My water, I had to get it. Yeah, I got it induced. So that was interesting with like the balloon.
Yeah.
And they have to, force you to dilate. And that was, for me, it was the waiting period, because I don't know if it's insurance reasons or their rules in the hospital or with the provider or my doctor, is I had to be 38 weeks. And the night before I came to the hospital, I was 37 weeks and 6 days.
Okay.
30. Yeah. So at midnight, when I turned 38 weeks, that's when they came in the room and was like, okay, we can insert the balloon. And I was like, oh my God, I've been waiting like 8 hours to just turn, to just go right from 37 to 38 weeks when I was just a few hours there. But yeah, I didn't know that. 1 in 10. So not a lot of mothers water break before labor.
Yeah. So number 2, babies cry while in the womb.
I actually looked this one up, and I did not know it was true, but it is true. Babies do cry in the womb.
Wow.
Fact. Yes. This is cool. Your heart grows during pregnancy.
Fact.
That's crazy. So it grows, and then does it shrink back after you deliver?
Yeah, it grows in size because of the increased blood volume in your body when you're pregnant. Your heart has to grow to accommodate and pump basically that blood with more efficiency. So your heart grows in size, and yes, it does go back to normal after you deliver.
Wow, that's really cool. And Jessica, you might know about this, but is this fact or fiction? Only one parent needs to carry the redhead gene to create a redhead baby.
Ooh, I can't remember. I think that's... I can't remember. Is it fact?
It's fiction. It's fiction.
Okay.
Both parents need to carry the redhead gene to create a redhead baby.
So you and your husband
have to have the redhead gene.
We both.
So you mentioned great grandfather.
Yeah.
And then your husband's great grandparents too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow. Okay. And then what color hair does your husband have?
It's funny because when he was a teenager, we met in high school. We didn't start dating in high school. We started dating as adults. But when he was in high school, he had like an auburn kind of color
Oh.
hair. But as he grew up
Mm.
and once he got to college, his hair was brown. But his beard is brown, red, and it used to be blonde, but now it's a little white. And
Wow. Okay.
Oh.
his leg hair is red. So he's like multicolored.
Oh wow, he
Wow.
definitely has the gene.
Yeah.
He definitely has it. I
Yeah,
can just tell.
and then how about your children, just out of curiosity? Do they have do their shade of red hair? Is it different?
Yes, it is. My son was born very much like with a shade like your both of Adrian and Stephanie's hair. And then as he's kind of grown and as he's going through puberty, it's changing a little bit. And my daughter, she's more like my husband. When she was a baby, she was a real redhead, like almost a gingery redhead. And then as she got older, it got darker and more auburn, and then it kind of got multicolored. So there's some like blonde and brown highlights in it, all natural. And then as
Oh.
she's hitting puberty, it's going back to red. So I'm just like, this is so fascinating watching their hair color change.
Yeah, like it evolves with their age. That
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
And speaking of red hair changing, fact or fiction, can red hair change during pregnancy?
Fact.
Yeah.
Yes, the hormone changes can cause this
Yeah.
for redheads, which is so, so cool. So, Jessica, we loved talking to you. I just feel like it's so awesome for moms to be able to have this outlet and know that they're not alone. Because I feel like,
Yeah.
just from hearing Stephanie's experiences, it's important for people to know that there are, if you're a redhead and you are experiencing all of these different, maybe you already had a baby and you're like, was this a normal experience? I think it's good to know that you can come on, or listen to a podcast like this and get so much information. So thank you for all of your knowledge.
Yeah.
But can you tell us what's next for you? Are you traveling back to Southeast Asia? And yeah, what's just next for you in general in terms of being a doula too?
Thank you. Yeah, we're taking a little breather from traveling. We're trying to find land and build a farm in kind of
Oh,
Oh,
wonderful.
central kind of north central Florida. And my hope is that one day I can, on our property, have like an education center. So moms
oh,
can
great.
come and have that support through pregnancy, can prepare for childbirth, can have that support postpartum that is so dearly needed.
Yeah.
So that would be my like long-term future goal. And yeah, I am totally up for traveling again one day. I would love to study like Mexican or Guatemalan birth culture because it's very
Mm.
fascinating. I really find their birth support very fascinating. And
How so?
the techniques that the Mayan midwives use and the midwives use are just so like, you watch them and you're like, are you familiar with a rebozo? It's
No.
a piece of cloth that's used to help with pain management in labor, or also like a mom can get on all fours and you can put the cloth around her belly like a hammock and kind of shift it to
Oh.
help baby into a good position. And this was a technique developed by
Mm.
the Mayan midwives. And they do other things with food as medicine and with like hands-on techniques for moms during birth, because a lot of them are too far away from a hospital. So they've had to figure out over the years, over the thousands of years, how to get this baby out safely for both mom and babe. So they just have some of the most creative birth methods that I've ever
Wow.
had the privilege of watching. So I would like to go learn hands on with them at some point. So yeah, just a dream.
Wow. When just one last story too. My husband and I, we were in Peru last year, and we were walking through Machu Picchu, which was like such a spiritual experience. And so we were walking through, and it was amazing. Have you been?
No, but it's on our
Oh,
like list, and we'd
okay.
like to see
Yeah.
Machu Picchu.
It's really amazing. And so we were walking through, and we had like a guide, and he was telling us all about, Peruvian culture. And it came up about COVID, because this was like a couple of years after COVID. And I was like, oh, like, what did you guys do? Because they were all like, everything's about the plants and everything's about like, Josh, my husband, has so many allergies. So they were telling him about all these different plants for him to like have with tea, like munya tea and all this stuff. And I was like, what do you guys do for COVID? And because, you know, they did get the vaccine, but they were like all natural all the time. And he's like, oh, we just drank breast milk.
Yeah.
That's what we did to cure COVID. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, the vitamins that like these mothers have. Like, so all of these like moms who were breastfeeding were like passing out their milk to like the cult, all of the people where we were to cure COVID. I was like, wow, moms are awesome. They're also curing COVID. This is amazing.
Yeah, that's super cool. Breast milk is so healing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it must be.
It is.
It must be.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much. You're, you're really amazing for what you're doing for moms and at such
very calming. I can see.
Yeah,
I can see how
yeah.
you're a great doula.
Yeah, and during such an emotional roller coaster ride, with pregnancy and birth, it is such a special time in a woman's life, and you are making like such a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrienne and Stephanie, for having me on. It was a pleasure talking with you both, and I just am so excited to start listening to your podcast regularly, and you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And anytime your daughter needs anything or son, make sure, as they get older, they can reach out anytime.
Thank you. I will.